are very fond of. Now, I just want to establish everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. I do not like microphones. They do things to your voice. Okay, so this thing, geometric abstraction, I hope it doesn't sound too weird. The people who are involved in it, my friends, have different names for it. And they're all so contrary that, you know, everybody has their own name. One calls it systematic constructivism. And if you use those, you know, I used to be totally blinded by these words in art and whatever. And if you just take them very literally, systems and constructing, and I'll go from there. Okay, so, yeah, I think we all have a notion of what art is. We don't know what it is in an unambiguous and didactic sense, but we each, in our own way, hold ideas about art. At a meeting on art I attended a while back, the idea of essence, for some reason, I forget why, didn't come up once, actually came up twice. And I was very taken because we're always trying to get at the essence of what we're seeing and what we're trying to convey to people. It led me to think that when any of us does try to articulate our thoughts and present ideas to anyone, we are really in pains to express the essence of it as we feel it and think it, be it a concept or an activity or an object. So have a little look at definitions and meanings. Essence, Wikipedia tells us, is the individual, real, or ultimate nature of a thing, especially as opposed to its existence. So, on the hunt to try and capture the real or ultimate nature of a thing as I see it. And I've written lots of talks. I think I have a great affection for this one because I was developing my own thoughts and feelings and ideas about art myself without realizing at first what I was doing. And it was a real joy to write this. Hard work, but a real joy. So this painting, I imagine not everyone is enamored of this kind of painting. I am. And I want to best express its essence, as I understand it, insofar as I'm capable. The twosome, and this is what David preferred to call this particular piece of art, not a diptyque, a twosome. In the 60s and 70s, David, with a group of artists, were engaged in developing notions encapsulated in systematic and constructive art. And some are pursuing the ideas even now. The art practice seems to have had various names, as I was saying. I'm calling it, for our purposes, systematic constructivism, although the name is geometric abstraction. My reading in art of the word systems takes two different directions. The systems art, based in developments in technology, that's one trajectory. My focus here is on the work of what I call systematic constructivists and their affiliates. As its name implies, its origins are rooted in constructivism. Constructivism is very crudely explained as initiated in 1913 with abstract geometric constructions. Constructivism, excuse me, it was suppressed by Stalinism when it first reared its shapely head in Russia in favor of social realism, which I'm sure you know about. But it had spread into Europe through various movements, especially the Bauhaus, and was promoted as a counter to what the proponents saw as the psychologically unhealthy irrationality of surrealism. I'll be talking about the way constructivism took root in England and what developed out of that. Does anybody recognise something in there that was of great consequence to the future of art? Well, now do I have a cursor? Can you see this cursor? Can you see the cursor? No. Why not, Chase? Oh dear, what a shame. Never mind. Big black one in the corner. One of the pioneers and most emblematic artists of abstract geometric art was Kazimir Malevich. His purpose was the search for an absolute and pure, expressive, non-figurative art. Non-figurative. His first experiments between 1912 and 1923 led him to create this movement based on a visual language of abstract geometric figures and neutral colours. In 1915, he presented his most iconic piece, the Black Square. Malevich promoted values of logic, mathematics, and objectivity, which was contrary to the subject art of the time. Beg upon subjective art of the time. This art practice, building on the structures of minimal art, but I must explain it is not minimal art, and I'll explain how it's different later on. Building on the structures of minimal art and conceptual art, adopted experimental aesthetic systems across a variety of media, including photography, dance, music, performance, painting, installation, video and film as more effective means to connect with the political developments of the decade. Now this is, yes, Richard Long. I've seen some of his land work and it's wonderful. The medium of walking, time, space and distance were subjects for Long's art. He imposed rigid structures to walks across the landscape. Anthony Hill developed the concept of an art form. I think I've got one of Anthony Hill's. Yes, with an underlying mathematical logic, but always with a view to the production of works which were aesthetically satisfying. His work was essentially in the international constructivist tradition. The members of the Systems Art Group subscribed to two related concepts. Abstract art as being constructed or built up of constituent elements. This constructional process being governed by some form of predetermined and rational or logical system. So the rational, mathematical, logical system was the basis on which they built. So it was constructed. And I hope that makes it a little clearer. The subject of the work, it's claimed, is the image itself. Kenneth Martin, who was one of the earliest proponents, wrote, "It's not reduction to a simple form, it's the building by simple elements of an expressive whole." And that is what distinguishes it from minimalism, which reduces. It's born out of constructivist art, as I've said. In time, the name of this work became systematic constructivism. This relief for me, this is Mary Martin, Kenneth Martin's wife, and this, for me, it's about energy. The black and white are firing off each other. They're still, of course, yet they are still, but there is great, as I see, vitality, a sense of striding. Perhaps the fact that it's a relief gives that sense. After an exhibition in Helsinki, the Systems Art Group, which is what they call themselves as a group, was formed in 1969 by Jeffrey Steele, David Saunders, and the first image you saw was a painting by David Saunders, Richard Paul Loza, I hope that's the right pronunciation, Gene Spencer's and Malcolm Hughes, who had been influenced by Kenneth and Mary Martin and others from the constructivist genre. There was no formal membership. Involvement in exhibitions and discussions was actually by personal choice. Highly political. Experimental composers Michael Parsons and Howard Skenton, and they belonged to quite a famous musical group called Scratch. And they were not musicians. The whole point was they would get together and play music as they could. And you didn't have to be practiced or professional. And they did amazing things. They were very popular in London. Seminars offered opportunities to discuss the interrelations of the paintings, philosophy, and music. Their first exhibition, Matrix, in 1971 in Bristol, was followed by a show at the Whitechapel Gallery in London in 1972, just called Systems, of which Malcolm Hughes said the objective was to promote a modern, classical and non-utopian art based on the idea of order with endless variety. So you could start off with a geometric shape and endlessly varied. Now that endless variety, somehow or another, that tweaked my imagination. Their art practice was particularly engaged with systems of proportion, balance, and measurement. This is elemental. Proportion, balance, and measurement. Measurement, I believe, is the fulcrum on which proportion and balance rest. They work together. And here is the person who I like so much. I find that difficult to look at, to be honest, but it's such an important part of Loza's work that I felt I should show it. Other people might like it. And he won in 1971 a very important prize for his art and the composition techniques that he developed. And this is the one I am so fond of. Oops, there's one thing. There we are. This I love. It's got those things that I talk about. Proportion, balance, and measurement. I first saw this painting many years ago, and actually I didn't know who had painted it. I didn't know anything about the art. I know it just got to me. I liked it so much I put it on my computer. And it was only later I found out all about it. I think to myself, why does this painting work? It perfectly satisfies that dictum of Malcolm Hughes about proportion, balance, and measurement. Now this man, Jeffrey Steele, was very important. He worked with David Saunders, that was the first image I showed you. Jeffrey Steele was one of the earliest exponents and one of the founder members of the System Art Group, concentrated in the early years mainly on relationships between black and white. He worked for 8 years purely in black and white and was identified with the op art movement, which was a great mistake. Optical art. He incorporated eventually from the 70s other colours into his art. Now, just as of side issue. Nothing to do with Bridget Riley, whose work you might know. He exhibited with her, but Riley has always worked, she says, intuitively, and she disclaimed any influence in her work of mathematics or science. Anybody familiar with these sorts of things? Interesting, their work gave consideration to phenomena such as the properties of prime numbers embedded in this Fibonacci sequence. The golden section and the Fibonacci number series. The geometry resulting in spiral structures occurs naturally in, I'm sure you all know, in shells and such. I think the pineapple expresses this, and there's various plants that show this, and there's a couple here. Here is an image of the golden ratio. I'm sure you've all heard talk about the golden ratio. And that's the way it works. You add in, how does it go? 8 and 5 is 13, I forget now, 13 to 21, 13 and 8. Is that 21? Yeah. You add in, isn't it the last number?
Yeah.
Yeah, the last number, thanks. The work of Mary and Kenneth Martin was a great influence on the group, and I'm going to show you more of theirs. With a few others, they made the transition from representational painting to geometric abstraction during the late 1940s. I can feel the constructivism, the constructing, out of which this whole movement originated and grew. A painting or relief was constructed from a vocabulary of largely geometric forms in accordance with the often mathematically based systems. And there it is, expressed in the Mona Lisa, and I think that's Mandela, isn't it? I don't know what he's doing there. And here we go. Small screw mobile, 1953. Kenneth began working in mobiles in the 1950s. He said in 1955, beyond the simplest geometric shapes lies a world of forms. It's not a reduction to simple forms of the complex scene before us. It is the building up by simple elements of an expressive whole. As David Saunders said, in a sense, you're giving yourself freedom by setting up restraints. The more elaborate the constraints, the richer in possibilities the game is. I think anyone who writes poetry or composes music will appreciate that statement. Their first exhibition, Matrix, was held in the Arnolfini Gallery in Bristol in 1971. And that's followed by Systems at the Whitechapel Gallery in 72. Now, some critics were offended that visual art could only be apprehended with verbal explanation. However, the art critic Jassia Reichhardt thought that Systems sounded austere, but found great pleasure in what she termed as clean elegance and respect for the manner in which the materials were used. In the 50s, two modes of theory and practice were distinguished. In the first, modern ideas about synthesis of art and architecture, something approached a total work of art, which actually originated with Wagner. There was a lot going on in theatre. I lecture on theatre, so So that's my first port of call. It originated in Wagner's work on the total, and now what did he call it? With, it was actually Walter Gropius who worked on total theatre. Gesamtkundschaft, a word similar to that. I don't know whether I've got it quite right. In his design, Gropius provided the flexibility for the theatre to meet the needs of any play. It could be transformed into any model, and the spectators could be placed strategically. He was able to make any stage he wanted from the traditional proscenium stage to the proscenium stage to a more intimate environment, only offered in the round or arena. So this was instant, immeasurably changeable, and could transform into any of those three shapes. It actually never got built, which is very sad. Yes, it is. Painting, in the same way, exists in and takes account of the environment. Where it hangs, its positioning on the wall, or sometimes sitting up against the wall, on the floor, are matters that go to make up all of its meaning. The experience of the viewer, whether they are looking up, across, or down, is all part of that event. Now, I was talking about basic geometric elements. There they are. Very simple. We all know them. The approach of these artists to abstract art was based on the conception of the art object being constructed from a vocabulary of basic geometric elements in accordance with some form of predetermined and often mathematical system or formula. And these systems or formulae were built on basic geometric elements. Now, here's one which I'm very fond of. It's entirely mathematical. Let's find my notes on Lanyon. This construction of Lanyon's has a number of basic geometric elements. Circle, oval, triangle, sorry. Their paintings appeal to the mind as well as to the eye and show precision, clarity of form, and rationality of process in their creation. Balance, to me, is the greater part of this kind of work. In this painting, the swirls and curves have a mathematical precision, yet they're fluid and sensual. Now, here is Richard Bell. I know Richard, he's a friend. He has moved over recent years to doing things like this. So, Richard said, we're all starting from somewhere known, but we don't know exactly what the visual outcome will be. I went to talk to Richard about his paintings. He's currently doing a series based on ideas expressed in curve. His current work concerns what he terms transforming surfaces. He will cut through the colour on a canvas, overpaint a section in a different hue, as you see here. That might be left, but might be painted over again in yet another hue. His catalogue explains surfaces are methodologically transformed, layered, measured, energies changed, perceived anew in modulated colour fields, edged into focus by boundaries left over. I think energy is, for me, and you will all find something different in it. It's perceived in modulated colour fields. I've seen a number of Richard's works. For me, the energy actually moves around the canvas. But then I know the changes he's making. So perhaps I'm moving with changes that I know. But it does move with colour modulations. In all this movement, the point of departure disappears as the outcome gradually reveals itself. I have a feeling, as I do with Rothko, that I want to scrape back the surface and see what is below. I want to know how he built it up. What are the stages by which he built it up? Magdalenian cave paintings. Now, David Saunders, that very, very first twosome, talked about having a formula, which he said dates back to prehistoric Magdalenian caves, some 20,000 years ago. There were professors, even then he explains, who understood the formula and went around checking that rules were adhered to. Excuse me, 20,000 years ago. However, the natural formations of the rocks, cracks, and crevices illustrate the relationship between the need for very strict rules and that interaction of chance which create the painting in front of you. David believed in that potent interaction of strict rules and chance. Cézanne claims that having a good formula was the basis of his success. I should explain here. David and I were very, very good friends for about 4 years. We were in touch for many years afterwards, not recently. He's old. He lives in the south of France. And while I was with David, I got to know the work and the people involved in systems art. I had the pleasure of listening to the artists talk about their work as the model was developing. Extraordinary experience for a non-artist. David now lives in the south of France, I've said that, a little town at the foot of the Pyrenees. Exhibitions, he's built a small art gallery in the garden of that place where he now lives. And it was just a great bundle of stones and mess when I was there. And I've seen pictures of the little exhibition hall, it's marvellous. And he shows other people engaged in that genre. They run debates and discussions on the theory and practice of the art form, which they publish. The body of work comes along with its own language and its own way of expression. I won't pretend to fully grasp the implications or its pretensions. I will give you a version, my version, that's all I can do, of its aims, and in the main say what approach to and feelings about this art are. The philosopher T.E. Hume said, "A new constructed geometric art based on the idea that abstract form can be an adequate means of expression." And I think about Lanyon, the one I showed a couple of minutes. And yeah, it's full of expression. Here we are. He said that he's rather bold. He's not an artist. He's not a person who talks about art. He's a philosopher. So it's rather limited expression, but it's a starting point. Here we go. Kandinsky, who I cannot get into. Sorry, folks. People are mad about Kandinsky. I do not get Wassily Kandinsky. He was very important So, wait a minute, this was his early stage and this was, he was working on this. Let me tell you everything in the right order. His work is highly symbolic. Okay, fair enough. Where are we? Highly symbolic. I don't know what to look at first. Where do I start? How do I proceed? He was credited with painting one of the first purely abstract modern works. He moved gradually from representational work to abstract. He developed his abstract style, the expressive intent of being accessible to audiences. Sorry, sir, not this one. Kandinsky was initially, actually interesting, he was initially a lawyer. Surprised me. Everything changed when he visited a Monet exhibition in Moscow in 1896, and he saw this painting of Monet. The colour and composition of the work had a profound impact on Kandinsky, one of the forerunners of pure, non-objective painting. Kandinsky was one of the first modern artists to explore a geometric approach in his abstract work. Non-objective art, and a lot of people use this expression, has no recognizable subject matter. He believed that total abstraction offered the possibility for profound, transcendental expression, and that copying from nature only interfered with this process of communicating a sense of the spiritual. Then we get on to this. Now, as I said, I can't do with it. It's too busy for me. I like, just one colour on a canvas. Perfectly happy with that. Like the one I showed you at the beginning, David Saunders. Now, I will be going back to that. Abstract art has historically been likened to music in its ability to convey emotional or expressive feelings and ideas without reliance or reference to recognizable objective forms already existing in reality. I was thinking about it, as I wrote this. This was the first talk I wrote that was entirely for me. Obviously, lots of people who painted, but it was about my feelings about art. It wasn't about, I don't know, first or second evidence and stuff like that. The feelings expressed here are mine, unless I say so. Kandinsky has discussed this connection in the way the practice of classical composition had influenced his work. He used musical terms such as improvisation and composition in the titles of his pre-war paintings, emphasizing the link between the two art forms. So I've chosen some paintings and comments by the artists, and here I do use what other people are saying, but I say so, to illustrate what I understand by this kind of art. I've chosen these simply because, no more or less than, I like them. They touch me deeply. This, I'm sure you'll be familiar with, Mondrian, as well as Kazimir Malevich. Piet Mondrian also embraced geometric abstraction. Mondrian's painting defines his very radical but classical approach to the construction of horizontal and vertical lines. His art was concerned with the search for universal values and aesthetics. Mondrian and other modernists wanted to move painting beyond the naturalistic depiction, to focus instead of the material properties of paint and its unique ability to express ideas abstractly using formal elements such as line and colour. His characteristic geometric style, expunged of all references to the real world and posited on the geometric division of the canvas through black, vertical and horizontal lines of varied thickness, was complemented by blocks of primary colours, particularly red, blue and yellow. He wrote, constructed with awareness and brought harmony and rhythm. This tells what he was painting at, what he was aiming at. But the harmony and rhythm, which I would add flow, is what I get from the painting. And of course, balance is instrumental. Here I am, back at measurement, balance, and proportion. And I guess proportion is a big element in this. Instrumental in the way the lines and application of colours work together. We're seeing the artist's determination to depict the underlying structure of reality. And on we go to John Ernst. This is a relief. John Ernst wrote in 1961, supposing trying to achieve some of the beauty of a formal mathematical system in a visual experience. Ernst worked in reliefs and constructions, and himself made a contribution to graph theory, for which he was given a very important mathematical prize. Yes, that's right. This relief gives that sense of harmony and balance I look for. It's a visual experience of exquisite balance as well as proportion. I find the combination of art and maths very exciting. Perhaps afterwards people might feel inclined to tell me their experience, your experience of mathematics and art. Here's Malcolm Hughes. Stephen Bannon, who taught in History of Art at Bristol School of Art, said of Malcolm Hughes that he shows us the ambiguous nature of painted canvas. Bannon meant by this said what he meant. Am I looking for? Am I looking at it? Or is it looking at me? My understanding is that it takes me into itself. Hughes worked with specific number sequences, like the Fibonacci sequence, and progressions that exist independent of subjective feeling. So, what is being produced is a painting of some mathematical or geometric dimension that is by its nature abstract. They are objective and provide a set of constants. Again, we're in the realm of constraint versus chance. The physical structure is the result of measurement, very precise measurements, and determined by the forces of an objective nature, and I think the unexpected. These are, for me, surprisingly moving. As I see it, a piece is developed through chance interventions, so that the work becomes imbued with the feelings of the artist. However, it's really important to keep in mind that such a model lasts only until the artist's development suggests a different way of working. And I think that about theatre. The artist's, the performer's performance lasts for as long as that performance. It will change at the next one. Jean Spencer, who I think is just wonderful. Jean Spencer became a member of the systems group. Her early work was articulated by numerical or geometric logic, producing sequential white reliefs that explored the fall of light and shade across shifting rhythms of shapes and forms, defined by strict mathematical principles. That's a perfect example of that to me. Although our work became no less rigorous or precise, in the late 70s, Spencer started to move away from her previous constructions based on mathematical systems towards a practice of painting. Her research into colour became a major preoccupation for the rest of her life. And this, to me, is the ultimate piece of work. It's an exquisite, for me, expression of colour modulation and harmony and balance. Spencer says, I wanted to deal with deep violet as a problem and make a painting which starts with that deep violet. Spencer's work was always much admired by other artists, and you know, the whole of the group spoke with such affection of Jean Spencer and such respect for her work. The primary focus was the collective, collaborative, comprising exhibitions, lectures, talks, roundtable discussions on theoretical and political questions for contemporary practice. Anyone could go to the meetings. I went to one, I went to one myself. I remember it was very non-hierarchical, very political. A commitment to openness and accountability was considered essential to countering closed shop, exclusivist groupthink tendencies that had caused the failure of previous collaborative working practices. And here's Jean at work. She and Malcolm both died of cancer, perhaps 15, 20 years ago, which was, people were very sad to lose them both. They were very fine artists. She said, my work cannot be approached exclusively through either the emotions or the intellect. They represent an area common to both. A rational intuition. Now it's very interesting, rational intuition, because that comes directly from the philosopher Spinoza, who I happen to be involved with a group in about his work and his ideas. It's complicated stuff. And this is what I find in this kind of work. The rational, mathematical if you like, with an intuitive sense of the colour field. Yes, Jean and Martin both died. Mary Martin again. I love this. It's so teasing. I start with a drawing, often suggested by a mathematical idea, which I carry forward to a precise concept of shape and form. The mechanics of construction are part and parcel of the feeling. Form and construction must be one. I find there is a coherence about this piece. It's one of a series. I find one that's rigorous. It's actually full of fun. She's just going off in directions she fancies. Peter Lowe. And how's this for chance? My work deals with rhythm and the pleasures and surprises associated with the ambiguities of perception. It also reflects my liking for the simple and the obvious, the multifarious ways of seeing add to the enjoyment of ordered relationships. Rhythm refers to recurrence, which can be complex and simple, obvious and subliminal. I make objects because I seek the satisfaction of ordered relationships and patterns which exist nowhere else. So I find this a great tease. Now, do you know what, Tim Thompson? That's my friend Ray. Sadly, the colours were really very poor. We met actually at a college of Kyffin. He was teaching basic skills. I was working with people who have dyslexia. And we got friendly through the art, and it was a while before we realised, actually, he belonged to the constructivist systems art movement, SCAP. And he knew David, and he all knew everybody. It was lovely. Ray's approach in painting has been through structure. Along with Jean Spencer, he sees painting as a form of non-phonetic writing, which I think is just the most wonderful expression. Non-phonetic writing. The notation comprises formal, socially made elements, squares, rectangles, and so on. Measurable things, as you would have seen in the basic geometric elements. Where are they? That's quite long, isn't it? I think I should end soon. Mathematics, socially, I'll skim through. Mathematics, socially constructed. And I think that's a very interesting idea. There's an unknowable quality about art. And Ray says of himself, I've been more or less involved in the same thing for over 30 years and haven't got to the bottom of it. Well, there's something unknowable about it, so that's my problem. How to convey the essence of the unknowable. I will admit to knowingly submitting myself to this unknowable quality in paintings. Thank you, Ray, for letting me off the hook, but perhaps that's the wrong way of looking at it. I suspect the unknowable draws me in, unwittingly, into the search for the core of colour and shape. There is a certain austerity about these paintings. No indulgence, no giving way to sentimentality might in the end have to be explained through some academic rhetoric. Now, this is Ray's bleached and unbleached linen. Here we go to Rothko. Now, Rothko does not belong in this group at all, but there are elements in it that I find are akin. I think it's about shape. I think it's about spareness of paint on the canvas. He doesn't belong to the group. He's associated with abstract expressionism. He worked with thin mixtures of paint, and he painted layer after layer after layer to build up the particular colours he wanted. So, I don't know about you, but I can see little Rothko for a long time. He builds up colour, as I said. And it gives me that sense I want to scrape the colour away. Like I said to Richard Bell, I want to see what's the colour below. How did you build up that strength of hue that we sense in the painting? The whole idea of abstract art, to me, comes along with ambiguities of its own. Representational art depicts reality in as much as it is perceived, interpreted, and expressed by any one individual. Its chunk of reality, painted as only one particular individual might present or represent, depending on education, psychology, personality, sensibility, and a particular moment in time. If you set out to paint a certain thing tomorrow, it'll be totally different. So the moment in time is dependent on many things. So it's like when I try to describe something, trying to get the essence of it. And that essence will be limited. The limitations will depend on my vocabulary, my experience, my place in the world, and so on and so forth. This is, I'll show you all my favourites, Joseph Albert's. And he, to me, was the grand master, well, other people too, of the square. One of my artist friends thinks he's nearly interesting. I think that must have been Angela. He explored a series of chromatic interactions with nested squares. Albers is, above all, concerned with the relationship of colours and how they affect and change each other. Colour does not stand as I know it and think it. Colour doesn't just exist, it only exists in relation to other colours. I'm being warned, I have to stop. Back to David Saunders, and remember this from the beginning. And that is, I think, the last one. He says, no such thing as system style, since the patterns of thought are constantly changing and individual plastic works, plastic in the sense of forever moving, are purely samples of an ongoing generative process. The mathematical foundation, and I'll skip bits, but I'll just tell you, the mathematical foundation of this is each colour, let's say the two blacks, they are the same area in measurement, but expressed in different shapes. That's the mathematical basis for this painting. It hangs in my lounge, and I find a constant delight in looking at it. Each of those colours, the two beige-grey type colours,